everybody, welcome back to the Let's Talk podcast with me and David, and today we're going to be talking about 1980s John Carpenter's The Fog. And John Carpenter is one of my favorite directors of all time. This was the second collaboration between him and Deborah Hill, who co-wrote this film and also co-produced it. And this actually is not one of my favorite John Carpenter films, despite him being one of my all-time favorite directors. But David, I believe this is actually one of your favorite John Carpenter movies?
Yeah, I think I would put this up there as one of my favorites. It's one of those films that has actually kind of grown on me over the years.
Well, yeah, for me, it's one that I kind of just feels like I never could fully get connected to it. And it's funny because when you go back and listen to John Carpenter talk about this movie, he made Halloween. Him and Deborah Hill, they did Halloween, and he didn't expect this movie to be, even Halloween, to be a success at all. He was making Elvis, so he had heard that, the early critical reviews were pretty poor on it, and then it became an overnight sensation. They offered him a 2-movie deal, him and Deborah Hill, a 2-movie deal to get started and do their next one, and that's how they wrote The Fog and basically brought everybody back. One thing about John Carpenter is that I love is that he works with the same people, directors themselves, like Nick Castle and Tommy Lee Wallace. Tommy Lee Wallace, who directed it. Nick Castle directed, what did he direct?
The Last Starfighter?
That's it, The Last Starfighter. Nick Castle. And actually, Tom Atkins' name in this movie is Nick Castle, which is funny.
Yes. I'm just trying to think. He says this is Nick Castle. Is that actually his name, or was that a fake name he was using to make a phone call?
It might have been a fake name. I can't remember, but I could just see Tom Atkins like yelling, Nick Castle, like the way he says it, which is Tom Atkins, getting a little off topic. Shaved his mustache for this movie, which is very disappointing to me.
Yeah, I think he lost a wee bit of his mojo when he shaved that mustache off.
Didn't stop the women from fiending all over him, though. That's one thing about Tom Atkins through the 80s. It just feels like women were they wanted him. Yeah,
and one of the most strangest scenes in this movie is when obviously he picks up Jamie Lee Curtis and they end up in bed together, and after doing the deed, and he says, "What's your name?"
And yeah, she was just
like, they don't even know.
And it's weird because when he picks her up, she asks him, she's like, "Are you weird?" And then she's like, "Well, she said she was weird too, right?" So I guess this is what weird people do. They just hook up within an hour of meeting each other because it's still nighttime.
Yeah, that's right. It's still nighttime, right enough. Yeah, but when I first seen this movie, it was many years ago, John. As I say, I was a fan of Halloween, being a fan of horror movies, and I think I'd got bought The Thing. So I think that was the second Carpenter movie I'd seen from my memory. I don't know, I can't remember. I may have seen bits and pieces of Big Trouble in Little China when it was on TV in the 80s, 90s, and I don't even know if I'd seen Christine by that stage. I'm not sure. So I remember seeing The Fog on DVD. I think it was cheap, and I picked that one up, and I was just underwhelmed by it. I really didn't like it the first time I watched it. But over the years, I've went back and revisited it, and there's just something about this film that makes me come back to watch it again and again and again. And when I say again and again and again, it wouldn't be more than once a year, once every 2 years. I think what it's got down to is how it looks, how it feels. It's a very slow burn, but just the cinematography and the music, which Carpenter created for it, is very atmospheric. It's all that what I enjoy about that movie.
Yeah, that's honestly all the stuff I love about this movie. And it's kind of set up very similar to how Halloween was, the way we open the movie and then we have a very long low for a long time before something starts to happen again, and then it builds up to a big third act. So I kind of feel like we're structured like that. And the score is my favorite part of The Fog, honestly, and John Carpenter doing that and playing around with the synthesizer. I love it. I think this is one of his best scores that he ever did. So and it does create the atmosphere. And of course, what else creates atmosphere? Fog. So it's perfect to have that included in this movie and have these ghosts be in the fog, and that's the only place they operate. All that stuff I really like, and I like that this movie's basically a ghost story, and they set it up with a campfire and everything, setting up of what this is going to be and what Antonio Bay is.
100 years ago, on the 21st of April.
And then just basically you can just write it off as just a regular old-fashioned ghost story, but a very atmospheric one. But I do feel like every time I watch this one in comparison to other John Carpenter movies that it's missing something. And I don't know what, I can never put my finger on it because it has everything I like in a John Carpenter movie, but for some reason this one just doesn't click with me altogether.
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from there when you say it, because that's how I kind of felt the first time I seen it. I felt as if it was very forgettable. As I say, the reason I return is maybe it's more just, there's not much substance to it. It's just more kind of the visuals, which is what I enjoy about it.
The visuals are stunning in this movie, and I saw the special feature about how they had to make the fog work, which is very impressive, by the way, because it's a lot of fog that you have to have moving around, and the way they used miniatures and overlaid the fog. It's all very fascinating to make it, again, practical effects. We didn't have to use CGI for this. Now, I don't know if they did for the remake, because I've only seen the remake once, even though John Carpenter and Deborah Hill did produce it. I've only seen it one time.
I've never seen the remake. Again, when we were talking in the pod a few weeks ago, RoboCop, there's no reason for me to watch the remake, because if I want to watch The Fog, I'll watch The Fog. I don't see the point in watching the remake. But it's interesting you're saying about the special effects, the fact that you can't control fog, really, can you? And when they were firing the fog in, when they were filming, it was just the wind was blowing it away or blowing it in the wrong direction. And some of the shots they actually done in reverse. So it looked like the fog was coming in slowly, but it was actually going away.
Isn't it fascinating how they used to have to do things? It's one thing when I just, in comparison to what we have to deal with today, it's like so much easier, just even in general. Like, he's like, all right, yeah, I'll put the film in reverse, and that's the way he has to get the fog effect to work. Like he had to think on the spot. Nowadays it's like, yeah, they'll just handle it after. You don't worry about it. Just act. I'll say action. It's kind of like a huge different. Like, they were the ones actually. They went out and found the location. Him and Deborah Hill and everything. Yes. Like, they played a part in every single aspect of the filmmaking. Everybody. Tommy Lee Wallace is the production designer, and he co-edited the movie. I think that's what I like most about what John Carpenter and his filming style is I appreciate is that he feels very disconnected from the Hollywood system and just kind of does his own thing with his buddies.
Some of the most interesting parts of this movie in regards to making it, is you're right, is the fact that it's the same people that basically made Halloween, every single one of them. And you could argue it's a continuation of this guerrilla filmmaking he was doing with Halloween, which you say he didn't expect Halloween to be such a big hit, but all of a sudden him and his buddies have got a budget which is quadrupled, and they've got a lot more money to spend, and they're a guerrilla filming unit acting as now a bigger studio film team. I think as well what's very interesting to me about this film too is the fact that the very first cut Carpenter hated and it didn't work. He says it was a terrible, terrible film, and he had to go back and refilm a lot of scenes and put in like the pirates killing people. Because of that, it is in a certain aspect in vein of Halloween slasher rather than just a ghost story.
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much is a slasher film. It's very similar, I guess, to Halloween in the sense that, like, but in this sense, it's the whole town is going to be, it's a revenge tale, about the 100-year anniversary of Antonio Bay, and these ghosts who pretty much, they're the ghosts of another ship. I forget what the name of the type of ship they were.
A small clipper ship.
Basically, they got all killed, and then the money that they stole, they built the entire town on, and the whole town is built on a lie, essentially. And now these people want their revenge, and they want their gold back, and of course that builds up to the end of the movie with Hal Holbrook, Hal Holbrook is always great. I love seeing him in this movie. He has a very distinct and, he doesn't look like anybody else.
That's right, and you see all the returning faces from Halloween, the likes of Cyphers. What's his name again? Charles Cyphers.
Yeah, he was the father / the sheriff in Halloween.
In Halloween, and then you have Nancy Loomis as well, who's in this movie. Like, some of them, you're kind of like, what's the point of them being in this movie? You know what I mean? And then I think what's great is that they have Jamie Lee Curtis with Janet Leigh in this film.
And I'm assuming you watched the same special feature as me, where Jamie Lee Curtis from 1980 was talking about being in the movie with her mother, and they said that they were going to save, them really working together for, a really special movie. We never got that movie, right?
Well, They were in Halloween H2O together, so is that what they meant?
I don't know, because that feels similar to this, where like they barely share any time together. So I was like, they never really did a thing where they were acting against each other. So maybe she was lying, or she had hopes that some kind of big script for the both of them would come along.
Maybe something, she was, like you say, she was waiting for something to come along and never come through the door. For them to do, which they thought was worthwhile. But when she said that, I did laugh, because I thought to myself, yeah, the movie you done together was Halloween H2O, which, it isn't a great movie, never mind a great Halloween movie, but I do love that scene in Halloween H2O where Janet Leigh is leaving the school. I think she's like the secretary or something. And she says, I don't know, she says to Jamie Lee Curtis, that's me away for the weekend or something, or Happy Halloween, or something like that, Jamie Lee Curtis.
Happy Halloween.
And you hear the Sego music, and she gets in the car and drives off, and it's the exact same car that Marion Crane was driving in Sego.
I love that too. That's probably my favorite scene in H2O, was that, because of that homage. Because the rest of the movies, it's all right, but that scene makes it just all worthwhile.
Yeah, it's just creepy.
It's very creepy. It makes you think, right? Like, and then especially just because it's Janet Leigh, which is cool, because Janet Leigh, when she's doing interviews, she reminds me a lot of Jamie Lee Curtis, where they're like very down to earth kind of people. And like, yeah. It's funny, I forgot that because Janet Leigh told John Carpenter, she's like, if you ever have a role for a middle-aged woman, let me know. I'm like, why was she at the Halloween premiere? And I'm like, oh, well, her daughter's in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. There's, it's surprising maybe people don't know, especially the younger generation, might know that Jamie Lee Curtis had a famous mother, who was one of the top actresses of the 50s and 60s, and I actually love Janet Leigh. I love her performances in the movies she's done. As you said about her being down to earth, it's great that she's done this movie. Was he wanted to do a movie with John Carpenter, his second film.
It's incredible that she was just like, oh yeah, I'll do it for you, because mainly, and then of course Jamie Lee Curtis is back, and we haven't even said it yet, but the lead is played by Adrienne Barbeau, who was married to John Carpenter at the time, and yes. She's great in this movie, but it's weird. Every time I watch Adrienne Barbeau, I'm always more surprised she didn't do more, because she's great at commanding a scene, and I thought she'd be a bigger actress, and I don't know why she wasn't.
Yeah, I've only ever seen her in Escape from New York and The Fog.
Me too.
And when I
Creepshow.
You know what? I've never seen Creepshow.
Oh, yeah, well, she's great in Creepshow. Well, they're all small parts in Creepshow.
Yeah, because it's like 3 different stories.
Yeah, it's an anthology series. Actually, Tom Atkins is in one of them too.
He's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. But what you said about Adrienne Barbeau is like, I didn't appreciate her performance until I seen her interview in one of the special features, and she's nothing like the character she was playing in this movie. You're right, she's a very kind of strong and like you say, commanding voice in this film.
I actually love it. Like, and I also love that she has a separate radio voice and then a regular voice, and she like doesn't really let them intertwine until she actually starts to get scared towards the end, where she's like trying to reach out to her son. And actually, yeah. I love where they shot this movie, what Antonio Bay is. It looks like it's a very original setting, not only just for the lighthouse, but the beach itself, how it's like just so much like wet sand, like all the way leading up to like grass. I've never seen a beach like that personally. I don't know if, the beaches we have out here are just all like white sand leading up and then parking lots.
Well, we have plenty of beaches like that here. There's plenty of beautiful beaches around the coast of Ireland. I think some of them have been voted like the best beaches in the world, County Wexford and Donegal and places like that. Really, really nice, John. As a matter of fact, I think they filmed Saving Private Ryan on some of the beaches down south.
Oh my God, so then it's gorgeous.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right, the location, again, that goes back to the visuals. The location that they found for this, and I found that interesting too, was like, it was the lighthouse which dictated where they found the place to film. And I think they said a couple of miles up the road, I think it was like 6 miles, was it? I'm not sure, but John Carpenter said, is where they filmed The Birds. So again, there's another kind of Hitchcock connection Janet Leigh and Psycho and The Birds and
It all circles back. Although John Carpenter even said that they labeled him at the beginning of his career as like a Hitchcock knockoff. So, he could circle back to that too.
you can go back to that as well. But yeah, it's a really nice setting as well.
Well, everything. I love the setting. I love the church that they end up in at the very end. I think it's all very unique looking. The whole town itself has that small town on the coast like kind of feel to it. It just feels very original, especially for a horror movie, and I think it worked out perfectly because Halloween before this, it's Chicago, but it's California being Chicago, so you can kind of just see it. Whereas this, they can make a town and it feels like an original town that you've never seen before, and then obviously you cover it up in fog, so it looks even better.
Yeah, and the thing is too as well, how many ghost stories, like movie ghost stories, were out around the time that this film was being made and released?
There was so many at the time. Ghost stories, yeah, they were a dime a dozen. This one definitely does feel original.
Yeah, and I would actually love to see the original cut, because John Carpenter says like some of the people were actually just going into the fog and disappearing, and the audience reaction was, what happened to them? So that's why I had to go back and film showing them actually being killed by the pirates.
Yeah, because him and Deborah Hill both said that they tell don't show, they just disappear, and then that's scarier because we don't know exactly what happened, and your imagination's always going to be scarier than us showing something. But
yes,
I guess they went too far with regular audiences at the time. But honestly, John Carpenter in general, he never was a critical success until way past his prime, and then people started to recognize him a little bit more. Back in the 80s when all his movies come out, all the critics would always knock all of his movies. They were never financial successes. Yeah. And what bothers me about that is once they start to get reevaluated by certain people, then all the critics who were knocking him at the time or knocking his films, they do reevaluations or re-reviews, and I'm like, I understand that, but I feel like this isn't exactly how you feel. I feel like you're just doing this so that you don't get knocked for giving a good film a bad review.
Yes, and you know what? I've seen the likes of Siskel and Ebert doing the exact same thing. I seen a story where Jim Carrey, I don't know if you've seen this, John, because I know you're a big Jim Carrey fan.
I have exorcised the demons. This house is clear.
Where when Ace Ventura came out, they slated it once it was a hit, and he went on to do The Mask and Dumb and Dumber and Batman Forever. They'd done a program just dedicated to Jim Carrey and called him a genius and a comic genius, and basically revised their original review of Ace Ventura and said, we got it wrong.
I appreciate you getting it wrong, and if you really genuinely feel that way, but I feel like that it's more like bending to need it to everyone else feels, because now you kind of, yes, you're on the outside looking in. So, and that's always what kind of bothers me. It's that's not genuinely how you feel. That's just how you are adjusting your opinion to how everybody feels.
And do you think that the reason that John Carpenter is getting a lot of, what would you say, love for his movies in retrospect is mainly down to the fans that his films have garnered over the last few decades?
Yeah, I would definitely say that what happened was, critics at the time in the early 80s, John Carpenter for the most part made genre films. He never made movies other than Starman that were, even that's a genre film, that are trying to reach the Academy Awards or anything like that. His movies are more toward commercial audiences. So of course, snobby 80s critics go into the theater, they see a movie like Halloween or a movie like The Fog, and they just immediately write it off without actually studying the filmmaking, which is, as a critic, is something you're not supposed to do. But my guess is that then as years went on, those younger fans became critics themselves, and they started looking at these movies and going, these are great movies. Just because they're not highbrow dramas doesn't mean that they're bad films. Because Siskel and Ebert, speaking of them, they just wrote off any film that was horror. It didn't even matter. It just unless it was The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby, which are highbrow, I guess. But I just think there's levels to filmmaking, and people need to respect that there's other genres. And I just feel like overall, critics, the Academy Awards, just ignore them.
Yeah, and that's the thing, that the feeling as well that I have with John Carpenter's movies too. I feel as if they're very have one foot in like a comic book world.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I should have asked you that because you aren't the biggest John Carpenter guy, and so you probably feel similar to how a lot of people is, and I always wondered why is that, because you're not the only person I know who's not the biggest Carpenter guy.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be mad about him like some horror fans are. I think like most, it's like, you know, we've talked about me personally, Spielberg. I thought Spielberg's best era was his earlier movies, you know, and I think his 90s movies, every one of them's nearly excellent apart from maybe a handful. And it's like James Cameron, his first few movies to me were the best, and it's the same with John Carpenter. If you look at like Halloween and The Fog and The Thing, they're to me off the top of my head probably his best three movies, and they were all his earlier works, you know. Then you go down the road of Christine, which he had to do for financial reasons because The Thing was a flop, and then he went on to do the likes of Big Trouble in Little China, and again that was a financial flop, so he was under the cosh again to kind of produce something that was a hit. And I think, I'm not sure, after that he done They Live, and I really enjoyed They Live, but to me They Live is maybe his last really good movie. Anything after that I'm not too fussed on. I mean, even Christine to me is touch and go, because I think it's, and that's not his fault, by the way, John Carpenter, because I think what he made was an excellent movie, but the story is insane.
I actually don't know what happened because, like, I actually really enjoy Christine. I wouldn't say it's a top 5 Carpenter, but it's around the top 10.
Oh yeah, just the movie itself is
Yeah.
absurd to me. Yeah, oh yeah, about a killer car. I mean, over the years, John, we've seen movies, right? Okay, with killer birds,
Yeah.
killer sharks. You know, Cujo again. Kind of believable, you know, a rabid dog. Now they're nature revenge movies. But then we move into the absurd of a killer car.
You know, it's so funny. It's ridiculously absurd. You're 100% right. But for some reason, I buy into the movie. I don't know why. Because then the car starts to change the main character's personality, too, which is even more fascinating. But it's absolutely ridiculous. The car is, like, in love with him. The car is out there seeking its own revenge.
Yeah, exactly. And look, you know, again, that's probably not Carpenter's fault. He needed a hit. He took on the project, and he made a very good movie. He probably made a better movie than what it has any right to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the performances are good. The special effects are top notch, you know. But again, as I go back to what I was saying, do you feel as if he has one foot in the comic book world, like a Tales from the Crypt? I feel like his movies have a Tales from the Crypt vibe.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely true. His movies are definitely operating always in, like, somewhat of a fantasy world where each one of his movies you're, like, in and out. It tells its own unique story. Like, Escape from New York is 100% like almost a Twilight Zone episode too. Manhattan's been turned into a prison. Like, that's a very obscene plot, and you know, almost a B movie actually in the 1980s.
Yes.
And, you know, especially with the special effects and how that all works with it. I always liked that, though, because he was trying to do something original and unique. Like, I love Escape from New York. I love Snake Plissken. I love how Manhattan looks in that movie. And then, you know what it is with John Carpenter with me is, like, no matter if the movie's good or bad, the score is always good. Even, like,
Yes,
his really late stuff, like Ghosts of Mars is a horrible movie, but the score is great.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And look, I actually forgot about Escape from New Yorker when I was talking about his early movies. Again, that's up there. Like, I mean, probably top 4. Those 4 there, those first early ones are probably for me is top 4. Really love They Live because I really like the message of They Live, you know, and the aliens and stuff. But yes, and his scores, like you say about directors in the 70s that were taking B movie stories, their filmmaking craft was elevating them to A movie stories. Brian De Palma done it with Carrie. You know what I mean. Spielberg done it with Big Fish. And there was a few others. And I feel that you're right. That's what Carpenter did with the likes of Halloween. Created a subgenre which he could never escape from. But you're right. Carpenter as well. What I like about Carpenter is that not one of his projects are the same. He does something different in every one of his movies.
Yeah, from what I can tell about John Carpenter, and like I'm just like fascinated with the guy. It's like he's a very, very, very intelligent person when you hear him talk. Like, because like I said, like him and everybody he surrounds himself with, they love filmmaking and they love every aspect of it. They're not on the set, like they're trying to be involved in everything. And actually, funny enough, Deborah Hill gave jobs to a lot of young filmmakers or even actors. Like Robert Englund was one of the guys picking up leaves in Halloween. So...
I've heard that, yeah.
And James Cameron worked for Deborah Hill in the special effects department. So, these people got like their starts from them because, like you were saying earlier, guerrilla filmmaking. So they know what it's like to be at the bottom, where a lot of directors and stuff like that, they become, unfortunately, even if they start at the bottom, they forget and they kind of become like snooty. Whereas John Carpenter never felt like he ever left that. Like he just likes to, like, nowadays, like even though he just likes to play video games. That's it.
And music, he does music with his son, doesn't he?
Yeah, he was in a band with Tommy Lee Wallace, actually. They were in a band together in the 80s. Like, he just likes to do what he likes to do.
Yeah, and look, I respect. It's not like I dislike John Carpenter or dislike John Carpenter movies. I mightn't think of him as on the same level as, say, James Cameron. Do you know what I mean? Or Spielberg or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And the thing is that I think when he makes movies, they're well crafted. And you're right. I do like the fact that he does what he wants to do, and that was part of the problem with Escape from New York, Big Trouble in Little China, was the studio just didn't get it. They just didn't get it, and in the end, he felt as if he had to leave the studio system then because they had too much kind of input or control. They didn't really advertise it the way it should have been advertised, and they were recommending edits, and they wanted Jack Burton to be the hero, and he was kind of like, no, he's not the hero. He's kind of like
He's an idiot.
The nerdy guy. Yeah, he's an idiot. Yeah, exactly. It's actually quite funny. Maybe I really like it, but. And he was like, they just don't get it. And I think he, after, the thing flopping and then having to make Christine and then making Big Trouble in Little China and then having the interference, I think he kind of fell out of love with the filmmaking aspect.
Yeah, that's honestly, I can understand that. You hear that a lot from a lot of filmmakers, is that it's just, a lot of them fight for like creative control, because the filmmaking process in general, especially if you're doing it for a studio, is you're going to have executives giving you notes, things that they have to have in the movie. That's why it's surprising when a lot of like small directors go work for Marvel. Like, that's pretty much Kevin Feige running that, and you're really there just to kind of put your vision through his filter almost. And that's any studio film, really.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys that came along in that era of Carpenter, your De Palmas and your Spielbergs and your Scorseses and even George Lucas, they started off in independent studios and then moved into the bigger studios in-house because they were talented. They were getting paid better.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Money's a big deal and you need it.
Money talks, John. But, I'm just thinking about this movie, like getting back to the actual fog, is like there's some funny shots in it. Like that priest is like, I don't trust that guy. I wouldn't trust that guy as far as I could throw him, and it wouldn't be very far. And I love when he actually comes out of the darkness and scares Janet Leigh. He just comes out of nowhere. It's like,
yeah, I love the priest in this movie. That's Hal Holbrook. He's just a weird looking guy, man, in general. And then he's always drinking. But yeah,
he's drinking the wine.
But I mean, he's got a guilty
wine.
conscience the whole movie, so he's just freaking out because he knows what's gonna happen. He's like, I know what we did. My family was a part of this. If we don't fix this, we're done.
Yeah, we're all doomed, so we are. And then that was the criticism that the film got. The criticism the film got was that there was only 6 people that they were going to kill, and as the numbers started racking up, then that meant that the other people were not in danger.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Like, yeah, you do kind of set a cap on what they're actually going to kill. But I mean, how many other horror movies, like, where it's just one person hunting down somebody else? It happens.
That's true.
Like, we have plenty, like, and then there's collateral damage. But this movie, even though we know it's only for the 6, we got that great opening sequence on the ship. Very atmospheric, which I love that, before we end up slowing it down for a while. And then you have the other moments that are, like, you never seen in film before. Or, I feel like some movies have ripped it off, but like with the driftwood like going on fire, like that's kind of scary.
Yeah, and I love that shot actually. And again, this is interesting because me and you, we love film, but we also love the mechanics of filmmaking.
Yes.
And I'm always fascinated by alternate versions. Deleted scenes.
People like, I agree with you. Like, people don't understand the power of editing. You could just re-edit something, and the whole movie can come out completely different.
And that's what happened with this. And one of the shots that they went back and they wrote and added into the movie was that boat at the start and the crew being murdered by the pirates. But when you see the pirate ship pass and the sails, I love that scene. And I love as well the blacks in this movie. They're very deep. And the way the light comes out of the blacks, you can't really see what's there or what's going on. And yeah, that's a great scene at the start when the guys in the boat get killed.
I love it. I think that's definitely a perfect start to the movie. And again, one thing with John Carpenter, you combine it with score, and like it's very similar to the beginning of Halloween when Dr. Loomis is driving with the nurse up to the hospital, and it's raining out. You got the score going. It just creates this atmosphere. Like you do kind of feel like you're there, and it just gets it's enough to get under your skin. You don't have to. It's not like the most thrilling thing, but you're petrified because you feel like you're in it.
Exactly, and I have to say that there is some very suspenseful scenes. I mean, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when they find the dead body on the ship, and it's Jamie Lee Curtis and Tom Atkins are in the hospital, but it's like the morgue, and they're looking at the body, and the guy doing the post-mortem says, look, this guy's been underwater for like months, it hasn't been days, and he's like, well, they found him on the boat, how could he wasn't in the water, and he's like, well, that's what it's telling me. But then he gets off the trolley and starts walking towards Jamie Lee Curtis. I think just the way it's shot and the suspense, I really love that scene. It kind of reminds me a bit of Salem's Lot when the woman turns into the vampire.
I always think of Salem's Lot too when I watch this, because just some of the interiors look very similar. So like I always kind of think of that too, in the way it's lit. So it's actually funny you said that.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. And so I don't know if Carpenter realized that it was very similar. And instead of killing the vampire, for some reason the body just falls.
Yeah,
rates a 3 in the ground.
Speaking of which, killing everybody. What do you think of the end of this movie with Hal Holbrook? That's one thing I'm curious about, because like he gets that big gold cross, and I actually really love the scene of it starting to glow. I honestly think that's an iconic image. I love that image.
Yes, I love that, and how he's holding on to the cross, and the parrot is on the other side trying to take the gold cross off him, and Tom Atkins has to go up and pull him away. Like when he goes back into the church at the end, and then you see the parrot behind him, and it doesn't show you anything, you just hear it.
That just tells you it's a campfire story, just to let you know, like, oh, we got to send the kids home, scared, like one last thing. Like, I don't know if you ever watched a TV show when you were younger, but it was on Nickelodeon. I'm sure they had that out there. It was called Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yes, I remember that show. Yeah.
And they would tell stories, and at the end of pretty much every story, though, they would leave it with a stinger. And, horror movies have always done that, but this kind of feels like that was more in that vein, because we just told this scary story, and, you can't win in the end. There's got to be some kind of, like, oh, is it over? Yeah,
exactly. And did you know who played the parrot at the end with the red glowing eyes?
No.
Rob Bottin.
Really?
Yeah, who done the effects for the thing. He got a job on this to create some of the parrot special effects, and he put it on, and I don't know if he put it on or they just looked at him and went, look, you're the right size, you could play this part. So that's when you see that parrot coming out at the end, that's him.
Oh, that's awesome. See, again, John Carpenter, I mean, I guess he would go on to work with more with John Carpenter, but it's just funny. He always gets people like that, and he finds the right places. Like in the original Halloween, Deborah Hill's hands are actually the young Michael Myers hands. It's not actually a kid's, they're Deborah Hill's hands, and you got to do things like that to make it work.
Yeah, and that's how basically Hitchcock ended up in his own movies, and that became like a calling card for him. It was like, let's watch and see where Hitchcock is. And it all started back in the silent era, where they didn't have enough extras, and he would just put himself in scenes because they need someone.
But then it became such a running thing that he had to make sure he put himself in every movie.
Yes, it became a running gag then, but Hitchcock became a personality himself, and that's why in Psycho he's in at the very, very start, because he said, I can't put myself in it any later because people are going to be watching out for me, and I don't want them missing the suspense of the movie.
That's why he's such a genius. He didn't put his ego in front of it. Meanwhile, Tarantino puts himself right in the third act of all of his movies, and he can't act at all.
No. Don't you fucking realize, man, that if Bonnie comes home and finds a dead body in her house, I'm gonna get divorced?
And if he had his way, it wouldn't be hands that he's putting in, it would be feet.
Yeah. Oh my God, he loves fucking feet. That guy.
He does, and he's another one as well, which, in my opinion, his best movies are his first ones, his first three.
Yeah, honestly, it's really hard for me to debate that. I mean, my favorites are his first three. I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is kind of going up that list, which is funny because it's him returning to doing an LA movie. So,
Yeah,
but like, yeah,
which I think's one of his best, to be honest, as well.
me too. I mean, he kind of spent that little middle part there, like trying to play around with history and just making like really homages to all of his favorite things instead of like going back and doing what he does best.
And the funny thing is that I was thinking about this recently because Jackie Brown is one of my favorite Tarantino movies, and it's funny that he made a wrote the screenplay, but it's based on a novel, which he had
Rum
nothing
Punch.
to do with. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually never read the book, but I always just remember that because I just know I love the name. I'm like, how did you end up in Jackie Brown from Rum Punch? I'm like, Rum Punch would have been cool too.
Yeah, that's true.
But actually, speaking of directors like that, independent directors, I wanted to ask you something. Just even though it has nothing to do with the fog, did you see that Francis Ford Coppola's new movie, Screen Megalopolis? Megalopolis?
I've heard of it. I've heard of it. He's making this new movie, but I don't know anything about it.
I know nothing about it either. All I know is that he sold his entire winery for $120 million to fund this movie. So it's completely funded out of pocket. Screened it for like executives and everything like that, and apparently nobody wants it.
Crazy, but here he's some age. He probably doesn't need the money at this stage anyway.
Yeah, he's 85 years old, and actually he said he's not done. That's what I kind of admire about that is like apparently he's always done that, and like directors like John Cassavetes like funding it out of pocket, like that just means you truly love filmmaking. It's not even about money for you.
Well, maybe some of these guys, I get what you're saying. I agree with you. Yeah, because they're artists, they want their art realized. It's not about money for them, but some of these guys have made an awful lot of money, so I'd be interested to know how much more money he's got on top of it.
That's a really good point. You never know what people actually do have lying around. Like, yeah, it's just funny though, because you'll hear certain directors or certain actors talking about, oh yeah, we couldn't. Like Matt Damon was talking about this for one of his movies. They're like, yeah, we just couldn't get the funding to do this one scene. I'm thinking, you probably could have funded that one scene yourself, but he's not willing to do that. So some actors or directors aren't willing to actually put their own money out on the line.
Well, it's funny you should say that. Like Spielberg, when he was making Jaws, the head coming out of the boat, that was reshot because the original version, Richard Dreyfuss turns around to the hole in the boat and the head was already there, and there was no reaction from the audience. The biggest scare in the movie, the biggest jump in the movie up to that point was when the shark jumped up at Roy Scheider when he was chumming, and Spielberg knew himself. He was like, I can get another scare. That head coming out, I can do it better. And he went to the studio and they denied him the funds. They said, look, the movie's fine. You don't have to reshoot anything. You've already spent enough money on it. And he actually spent money out of his own pocket. And I keep in mind at that particular time, Spielberg is not the Spielberg he is now. He's not worth $4 billion or whatever it is. I think he just get paid for working on the movie, and he took money out of his own pocket and he reshot that scene himself and edited it in, and that's the shot you see in the movie now, and then that became the biggest scare in the movie.
That's smart, Steven Spielberg, that he was like, I know this will make it better. He's like, I'll put my own money out on the line, and then and then to get proven correct is even better. That's what's even like like being like, I was right. Like I put my money where my mouth is on this.
Yeah, they filmed that in a swimming pool.
You just don't have that anymore. That's something I just truly miss in filmmaking.
It was like $3,000 of his own money.
In 1974, when they were filming that?
75, early 75, just before the film was going to be released, I think. It might have been around March time when they were doing the previews, but they put milk in the swimming pool to make it murky, gallons of milk. They stole the head from the studio, and it was just the cameraman and the prop guy sticking the head, and the double for Richard Dreyfuss sticking the hand through, and he got it perfect. But the problem was that then the scare later in the movie, when the shark jumped out at Roy Scheider, the audience didn't jump as much because he said they didn't trust him after that. They were looking for everything then.
See, that's how you structure a horror movie, and that's why that movie is one of the best structured horror movies of all time. That's why that's why you get the picture on the wall behind you. That's how you earn it.
Okay.
Yep.
I was pointing there somewhere,
Yeah, but to circle back to this movie, because we got a little bit off topic. That's on me though, because I did want to ask you about that, because I find it fascinating when you're talking about guys like John Carpenter, who I feel like really love the art, and then how other because I mean, in every line of work, it's not even just the film industry. There's people who do it for the love, and then there's people who do it because it's a job and it pays well.
Yeah, no, look, I agree. Listen, I look at movies, not to be pretentious or snobbish. I mean, we're talking about horror movies here. I mean, some of my favorite movies are horror movies, and it doesn't even have to be, as you say, the high-end ones like The Exorcist or anything, you know. But to be movie making is an art. You know, not every director or filmmaker is an artist, in my opinion. And you're right to just do it because, not saying they don't love it, they do love it, but there's certain people out, directors that are artists, and John Carpenter to me is definitely one of them. James Cameron's another one. You know, Spielberg's another one. Scorsese's another one. They want to see their art up on the screen, and they'll do it at all costs to get it up there. You can't knock Carpenter for how his movies look. His movies always look fantastic, even if don't like the story, or you know what I mean?
For the most part, I just recently rewatched the last movie he directed called The Ward, and that movie is absolutely ugly. So... And honestly, it's atrocious. It's just sad that that's his last movie he ever directed, because I wanted to see it, because he's only made 2 films in the 2000s, actually. He made Ghosts of Mars, and he made The Ward, and I saw The Ward, and I was like, wasn't that bad? I forgot all about it. I went and rewatched it, and I was like, that's why I forgot about it. That is a bad movie.
Because it is that bad.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's the funny thing is, too, as well, John, is like, you know, I've seen Vampires and didn't think much of it. And I've seen Prince of Darkness, which I didn't mind. It's okay, but I don't think I've seen any of his like later movies doing this later than that. He may have been ahead of his time at the time, but I think that maybe movies surpassed him in a sense, because this whole like the synthwave and all music and all this came back, and it's great. I love listening to some of the synthwave music which he was doing for his movies in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, but it is of its time, really, isn't it?
It really is, and you're 100% right, because you just brought up guys like Spielberg and Martin Scorsese. I mean, how old are they? And they're gonna not stop. Like Martin Scorsese, Clint Eastwood, they're gonna die making movies. Like they're just gonna die in a film set one day. That's just how it ends for them, because they're not gonna stop. So, but John Carpenter, like since 2000, he's made 2 movies, and I think he's even younger than them. I think he's in only his 60s. So you know, he could direct if he wanted to. He doesn't want to, and I think that maybe he lost his passion, because I think They Live was 87, and honestly after that the only I do like Escape from LA. That's fun in a cheesy way, and In the Mouth of Madness from 93 is a fantastic film, but other than that, he's mostly everything that happened before from Halloween to They Live is pretty much a classic.
No, I totally agree. But listen, he had a great run there. Even if some of them movies, as we were talking earlier on, even if some of them movies weren't financial successes or critical successes, as you say, they've had kind of a retrospective, because the fans that love those movies, I think, and you can go back and watch The Thing, it's not dated. I don't feel like the Fog is dated. I could see a movie like this being made today in the exact same fashion. Okay, take out some of the practical effects like the fog and put them in with digital, you know, CGI, but it would be the same film.
100%, and it would work. I mean, the problem is they would actually ruin the movie that way, is because they would the actual real fog that these people had to interact with actually does make it works. It doesn't. That's something that doesn't not work for this movie. It works perfectly how the fog looks in this movie. It doesn't look cheesy. It doesn't look dated, despite the fact the way they had to actually do those effects. It actually still looks good. You know, you could argue that the kills aren't that violent, and that's one thing is you know, even in Halloween, John Carpenter really didn't have these like very gruesome deaths until I guess when he did The Thing, and that was when he started to really use the practical effects. And I guess that's where he got kind of like some of the gross out stuff. But before that, you know, the thing that looks scary are the actual pirates themselves, but there isn't like too much gore from the kills.
No, there's no gore, and you know, I actually think the most kind of like, if I can remember correctly, because look, as much as I say, this is a film that's grown on me over the years. I must have seen it, I don't know how many years ago, 15 years ago for the first time, but I must have only watched it, John, no more than 6 or 7 times, to be honest. And it's more recently that I've revisited it more often. Do you know what I mean? And so in those first 10 years, I probably only watched it twice. Do you know what I mean? So, as I say, the most scariest looking bit, I think, is when the sailor falls out on top of Jamie Lee Curtis. And do you know what? What an amazing piece of filmmaking from John Carpenter, because there's a red herring the door opens on the ship and the stuff falls out and she screams, and then you realize it's nothing, and she makes a comment about, oh, I'm going to head back to where I came from. Can't remember where it was. And then the next thing is, it's great timing for that sailor then to fall out of the locker behind her and land on top of her. And it's like, well, if you really study it, it's like a guy wearing a rubber mask. But for that split second, it looks creepy, because you can see it's like the face is like the can or whatever. It's all waterlogged and stuff. That's perfect timing filmmaking, because the audience breathes a sigh of relief once that locker opens and I think it's fishing rods or something falls out or whatever it may be, and everybody, you breathe a sigh of relief of, and then you might laugh a wee bit at Jamie Lee Curtis saying, oh, I'm heading back, and then boom, he hits you with it, and that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's a false jump scare done perfectly, whereas now horror movies, like the studio releases, overly rely on that false jump scare, and they won't even have the payoff like that. They'll just do it, and then they'll wait like 10 more minutes for a real one, but you've already gone past that false sense of reaction, false sense of comfort. Yes. It's too late. You have to really kind of nail it right there, and John Carpenter nailed it.
Yeah, and today's movies, they would put a really loud noise in there, or music, or something like that, and it's more, to me, the noise that scares people now, rather than the actual visual.
Yeah, 100%. That's not actually good filmmaking. People are scared. If someone shot a gun right next to your ear, you're going to jump 100 out of 100 times. So, of course,
Yeah.
That's just how our bodies react to a loud sound. Like, you're not actually scaring me, you're startling me.
Yes, exactly.
So exactly. There's a difference. That's why some of the greatest horror movies are like this, built on atmosphere with the occasional jump scare done to perfection.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that kind of just lazy, kind of hazy, slow pace of this town and things like that, and just some of the melodrama that's going on. And just like we talked back on a few pods ago, how I like small, intimate movies with a small cast and a small group of characters, and all these characters, they're all on their own wee kind of missions, and then eventually they all meet up at the end to defeat the pirates.
I love that, by the way, how they all end up in the same place for the birthday. It's perfect, honestly, to get them all together, because for a lot of time, they're all kind of split up in different groups.
Yes.
Which I like that, we kind of like get introduced. That's what I mean when they have that long low in the middle, but that's really a lot of development, and then we finally get to build up to them all interacting together, and we have that great third act.
Yes, and they're trying to kind of work out what's going on, and I actually really like the Nancy Loomis character and the Janet Leigh character together. You know what? I would love to see a spin-off movie with them two in it.
That would be nice.
Driving cross country and getting into all kind of shenanigans.
It'd be a great movie.
But it would have been easy to put Janet Leigh and Jamie Lee Curtis together, and they don't do it. I wonder, did they request that?
Yeah, I'm very curious about that too, why you wouldn't do that. It almost sells itself. But again, I just feel like we have smart people in the room with Deborah Hill and John Carpenter, and Jamie Lee Curtis and Janet Leigh too are pretty damn smart. Even at Jamie Lee Curtis's young age, they probably are that's just the kind of a cheap cash grab. We don't have to do that. It's almost like how all that build up to Al Pacino and Robert De Niro in that one seat in Heat.
Yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner.
It's been years.
Yeah.
We have, despite they were in The Godfather Part 2 together, they didn't share a scene. It's that build up to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like how they subvert Jamie Lee Curtis's character. And obviously, again, this is probably done intentionally. The fact of she's the square in Halloween. She's the straight girl who, is afraid to ask the boy out, hasn't had sex. And is that why she survived? And then in this movie, in the first 10 minutes, boom, she's in bed with Tom Atkins, who doesn't even have a moustache. Imagine if he had the moustache, what it would have been like.
She would have been taking off her shirt as she was getting into the car.
She would have been starting naked on the side of the road as she seen him approaching.
Yeah, because the light would be shining right off his glistening stash. So she would know. Yeah, that is funny. I actually didn't think about that. The whole point of of Halloween is that she doesn't have sex, and in this movie we're getting that out of the way right in the first third of the movie. So we're completely going a different route with Jamie Lee Curtis to basically, I guess, for the fans in 1980, change their expectations.
Yeah, well, I think it's basically saying as well that this is a different character. This isn't the same character that you've seen in Halloween, even though you might recognize the face. Do you know what I mean? And she's a wee bit more stronger in this one. Well, it's debatable. She is a wee bit more stronger in this one, but she is handing off Tom Atkins a lot. But it is kind of establishing that in the first start of the film, I feel.
Yeah, I think so. They definitely tried to definitely subvert our expectations with her, and it's different. It's not like nowadays we go on the internet. Most people probably saw her in Halloween, and this is probably the second time they've ever seen her. So I'm sure in her mind she's like, I can't play the same character because then I'm gonna get pigeonholed and always typecast as these types of characters.
Yeah, exactly. And I think she wanted to go against that, and also as well because I don't know. Look, if people kind of thought about that trope back then about the virgin survives, the virgin kills the boogeyman.
Actually,
because it was very early on. I mean, Friday the 13th came out the same year as this.
Yeah, I actually I've never thought about that either. That's another thing because when I was growing up, I saw Scream at a young age, and so I had already known about the horror tropes being taught to me before I probably had even seen half the horror movies that they're talking about in Scream, so I knew them. But yeah, I wonder how it was uncovering the tropes as they were going along. Did somebody just watch all these movies and go, oh, look at that, they're doing the exact same thing?
Yeah, and the thing is that it got me thinking there. It was part of the subverting expectation, as in, oh, she could be a victim. She's not going to be the hero like she was in Halloween.
That's 100% true. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. 100%. Got to try and put ourselves in 1980s shoes.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And very old shoes there would be.
Oh, yeah. At this point now, 44 years ago. I keep forgetting it's 2024. I swear to God, these last 5 years have just so I heard on a podcast today, they're like, oh yeah, 5 years since Avengers Endgame. I was like, oh my God, it's been 5 years since that came out.
Oh, it's crazy. I was talking about that earlier on about how fast the weeks are going past, John, and the fact that 1984 was 40 years ago, and I was born in 81. And that feels, I'm like, geez, I starting to feel old.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was just talking to somebody today, and I was looking at him, and I'm like, when I was a kid, this guy would look old to me. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm older than him.
Yeah.
So that's when do people look at me like did I think this guy? I don't know.
Yeah. So I keep the hair short because I just skipped grey and I'm going towards just white. So we are.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But speaking of old men, Charles Cyphers apparently was only 37 years of age in Halloween, yet he looks about 47.
Oh my God! People just used to look older back then. That's just another thing. I don't know what the hell it was. I'm sure you've seen all the memes online, about what's his name looking at a certain age, and then Tom Cruise or Paul Rudd's the same age as them now, and I'm like, damn, people just aged horribly back then.
Yeah, I mean, I think they maybe had a bit of harder lives, but I think they also probably all smoked, drank more. Probably didn't eat as well, you know what I mean? And then also I think as well, somebody like myself, who is balding and just decides to shave the head, that kind of makes you look a bit younger. Whereas back in those days, I don't think there was too many people doing that. So if they started losing their hair, they kept the sides, and I think that makes you look older as well.
Yeah, I never understood that. I always used to knock that. If I ever went like balder than I am now, if I couldn't wear a hat, I would always shave the sides off. I never understood the people who keep it. It works for some people, like Danny DeVito. For some reason, he's always kind of had that look, and it's worked for him. But for the most part, if you do that, and especially if you do the comb over, you look ridiculous.
Yeah. It does. I mean, and somebody's got to tell someone that's ridiculous. You need to do something about that, which is what I done when I see myself in photographs.
No, you want to pull that person to the side and be like, I don't know who you think you're fooling, because everyone knows what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. When I see myself in photographs and seen, the lack of hair on top. I mean, I'm going back here. I was in my late 20s. I thought to myself, it's about time you shave that off, David. You need to do something here. But Charles Cyphers, if there is one character that I loved seeing killed in this movie, it was him. He was such a creep.
Hold on, sweetheart. I want to check this out.
Dan!
He was. He would the way he would always call her honey, and Adrienne Barbeau's not that kind of girl either, but do you think that she was actually playing along with him because she needed him for the weather?
Oh yeah, I think she was. I don't want to say stringing him along. He makes it quite clear that he wants to get with her. Right? Do you want to go out for dinner? Now she is totally out of his league. Now I am of the impression that they don't know what each other looks like. They only know each other's voices, because she says something along the lines of when I hear your voice, or something like that. It's not exactly that line. I think that she is kind of being playful with him, not to be rude, and yet because he's also given her some updates on the weather, and she can use that on a radio station.
On my scope, appears to be a fog bank. It's about 25 miles out, moving in their direction.
Thanks, Dan. That's worth about 10 seconds.
Yeah, I was just curious if, like, you know, because I'm like, you know, maybe she doesn't realize, but I just feel like her character is too smart for that, for her. I think she just knows, like, yeah, let him do his thing. It's whatever. It's the 1980s, you know.
Yeah, and I think she thinks he's harmless at the same time too, which he probably is. You know, there's nothing wrong with asking a girl out. You know what I mean?
No, he looks like a lonely guy. He said that he never takes days off, so he probably lives alone. And, like, you know, this is probably his only interaction with a woman. They're like, I thought you were off tonight. He's like, I'm never off. I love my job. Like, he wanted to go talk to her. That's what he wanted to do. That's the bright spot of his day.
Yeah, and there's nothing. Listen, there's absolutely, in my opinion, nothing wrong with it. But different if you're like harassing someone. You know what I mean? That's completely different. But I
She's
think
calling him.
She's called it. Yeah, it's a playful thing. It's like, you know, he doesn't have a chance, and she knows that, and I think she knows if he's interested, but she's not going there. But I mean, I really like that whole kind of setting of her, you know, in the lighthouse and doing the radio show, and her radio voice is really nice, and the fact that she goes in to start work at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the day. I mean, that's a long old shift, and then she's on to like the early hours of the morning.
She's got a ridiculously long day, and I think that she's the only person actually doing any sort of radio out there. That's why.
Yes, in the lighthouse, and I love those shots of her looking out onto the sea. And I was going to actually ask you, John, do you think that Tarantino stole from this movie for Reservoir Dogs?
You know, Tarantino has stole a lot of things, so I wouldn't be surprised if he stole from this movie too.
Yeah, like it's like K Billy's super sounds of the 70s. The way to have the radio playing throughout the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't
introducing the songs.
I mean, he definitely took that from somewhere, but was there anything that did that before this? I mean, I don't know. I mean, they've used that in other things, like in Do the Right Thing, they do that too, where the radio is playing and we keep cutting back to Samuel Jackson. So
right.
I don't know if this was the first movie to use that aspect, but you know, with the voice though, I could see that definitely being the way that Tarantino took it. The
yeah, and of course,
voice.
You're right. Exactly, and that's what I'm saying. It's very similar the way the voice comes across, and then in Gremlins as well, which was 4 years after this, you had the radio station Rockin' Ricky, and he gets attacked by the Gremlins.
Well, Gremlins ruined that town.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that at the end. Rockin' Ricky's had a hard night, but we're back. Something I remember. And his pictures, Indiana Jones. He's got the whip and he's got the earphones on.
Yeah, you know, that's Spielberg produced that movie. He's got to make sure that Joe Dante's got to make sure he pays homage to the king.
Right, well, there was an Indiana Jones movie coming out that year, so that's a bit of free advertising. Don't forget
that
Indiana Jones.
Temple of Doom came out that at some point that year. I don't remember which came out first, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not sure of when it came out, the dates that came out. I know that Gremlins came out around the same time as Ghostbusters, but I'm trying to think, was Ghostbusters a summer movie? I think it was.
Yeah, they just didn't really care about like the seasons back then, because if they were smart, Gremlins would be out like between Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's the best time for that.
The thing was that movies used to be released in December, right? And because they would think that in the summer nobody wants to go and sit in a movie theater, but then this changed all that.
Yeah.
Right. And then they started releasing in the summer until Titanic. Titanic was released in winter and broke all box office records. And now they seem to kind of rather than have a summer season. Yes, you have a season where a lot of movies come out in the summer, but you are getting more and more blockbusters coming out in, say, autumn, spring, you know, winter. Look at this year, or Joker 2 is out in October again. The original was released in October and grossed $1 billion. Was released in the same month, first one, and that became the highest grossing movie of that month of all time. And then I think that Joker surpassed that. So it's not like they're saying, oh, we had a blockbuster with Joker in October, now we're going to release it in the summer because it's the summer season. Though they're sticking with October.
Yeah, I mean, that's smart. And honestly, I think with these people, like the way these studios pick their dates, if you want your movie to be a success, if you know you have a movie on your hand that could be successful, don't release it around other movies. Give yourself a window. Like last year when they did Oppenheimer and Barbie, people forget that came out the week after Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. And that was it. Dead Reckoning was dead once Oppenheimer and Barbie came out, because now the word of mouth has shifted. That's the world we live in now. Word of mouth it's over so fast. If once the next thing comes, the last thing's just completely forgotten about. So you can't release multiple things like on the same. You got to give your movies a little bit of a window. So using the entire year is much better than what they were doing. But also in the 1980s, the reason why blockbusters were so big, you know, it did have that summer heat. You go into a cool off in a cool air conditioned movie theater and watch a movie like that. But it would be weird seeing Gremlins.
Yeah, but listen, you know, I'm a big believer of seasonal movies. You know, I was saying that to my dad earlier. I says we were doing the pod tonight, and I says we're doing the Fog, and it's set in April. I didn't realize till I put it on. It is actually set in April, like around the 20th to 21st of April. And I says to my dad, you know, John's like myself, he believes in seasonal movies. And it says, you know, you can't watch The Shining in the dead of summer. You're best watching it in the winter.
No. And what's crazy when you think about it is in 1988, Die Hard came out in July. And nothing about that feels like July.
John, I went to see Batman Returns in the middle of July, I think it was. Or it might have been August. Yeah, the middle of summer. Yeah. I was a child at the time. I was a kid at the time. It didn't bother me. But that movie maybe would have been better coming out in the winter.
Yeah, that would have made a lot of sense. Would have made a lot of sense for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, too. Honestly, when you watch that, it feels more like a winter movie than a summer movie.
I think that was originally scheduled to come out in December.
Oh, was it?
And they moved it. I'm near certain it was. I remember seeing it advertised December 2023, because I remember saying to my daughter about going to see it around Christmas, because it's her birthday around then. We'll go and watch it. And I think it was moved for some reason.
Oh, well, okay. So that makes sense then, because it definitely does not feel like a summer, spring movie when you watch it. It feels like a winter movie. Have you seen it yet?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Oh, well, what'd you think?
Well, I only went because I promised my daughter a go. Oddly enough, I was entertained by them for the most part. I didn't think it was a great movie. I thought that it was a bit slow. I didn't think it was particularly funny. And I didn't like how they didn't really bust any ghosts.
They really didn't.
Yeah. See the opening, it shows you New York, 1904, and they go into the firehouse and all. That was brilliant. See, when it first started, I went, whoa, this is really good. The first 5 minutes. And then to me, it just went downhill after that. I don't know. Look, it's like everything. I think we've mentioned it on the pod before. It's like Terminator 1, Terminator 2, that's it. Finished. Aliens, that's it. It's finished. For me, Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and that's it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's it for me, too. But, I mean, the audience I saw it with, the kids seemed happy. Was your daughter happy with it? Because I feel like this was more of a kid's movie.
Yeah, she enjoyed it. I got home, I asked her, what mark would you give it out of 10? And she said 10 out of 10. So she liked it.
That's all that matters then, really, is that, you know, it doesn't have to be for us.
Exactly, and you know what? That's why I brought her to see it. It honestly wasn't for me. I really wasn't that interested. I was interested in Afterlife. I brought her to see that. She liked that, loved that movie. I didn't really like it. And then when they were making a sequel, I told her, or a sequel to Afterlife, I told her, and she was like, come on, go and see it. And I said, of course we can. So it was for her. And look, you're right. Maybe, I think you done a review on it, didn't you?
Yeah.
And I think you had said, you know, if we grew up watching Ghostbusters 1 and 2, you know, and we look back fondly on that, maybe your kids will look back fondly in Afterlife and this one in years to come. And that's fair enough.
Yeah, like I can see people liking, like, you know, Podcast and what's her name, Mackenzie Grace. Yeah, like looking back on all them as, like, you know, fond characters from this time. I mean, like, what's his name, Wolf something from
Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah, Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things. Like, he just had nothing to do in this movie. They gave him a B storyline with Slimer, and that was it.
See, this was the thing. My younger brother's a big Ghostbusters fan, and he went to see it. He brought his girls to see it. He asked me what did I think, and then I asked him what did he think, and that's what I said to him. Like, a lot of these returning characters that came into the movie, like Lucky and Podcast, and there was really no reason for them to be there. To be perfectly honest with you, think about it, John. This is my personal opinion, but I made of the movie after watching it once. Nobody had anything to do really.
No.
You know, the mum, Paul Rudd, nothing to do. The subplot with Slimer was fan service. What was that all about? It didn't add anything to the story. That's the way I felt about it. I loved seeing Dan Aykroyd, Ray, in the Occult bookstore. I thought that was brilliant.
I actually really enjoyed the scenes between Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson. I actually felt like they were like those certain scenes were like with them reflecting on the past and like, you know, like getting old and everything like that. Golden years, like that stuff all worked.
Yeah.
It's just that stuff, there wasn't much of it. And even like Bill Murray, I feel like he just popped up on the set and like they're like, all right, let's get your scenes in.
Yeah, I listen. I like Bill Murray, and I like what he said about I kind of guessed the end as well, but like you said, it's for children about the match when the later didn't work.
Yeah.
And I said to my daughter, the ghost has got a match. She's going to come out with a match. But I liked when Ray says, I give up smoking in the 90s, because you see him smoke in the first movie, but you don't see him smoke in the second movie, which came out in 1989. But Bill Murray says, I was proud of you then, and I'm proud of you now.
That was my favorite line in the movie too. I just,
Yeah.
I love that.
I did laugh out loud at that.
I did also laugh at Bill Murray having the liquor still in there too. He's like, anyone need to drink some liquid courage?
Yeah. So look, there was moments like there was a bit too much fan service for me, as in like the librarian ghost. I didn't need to be in there. It was just a wink and a nod to the fans. Remember the librarian ghost? And it was the same with the guy that was running the library. It's the same guy. And I actually guessed that Walter Peck would be the mayor. I guessed that months ago when I seen him in the trailer. I went, he's going to be the mayor, and he's going to try and shut them down. And he will shut them down this time. There was just too many plot holes as well. I just felt too.
Yeah. If you start looking at it with a fine-tooth comb, there is a million plot holes, especially when it comes to like Walter Peck's character in general. I mean, and they also kind of like toned him back a little bit in this movie. I mean, maybe, you know, like he's getting older, but still, it's like he wasn't like the mustache twirling villain like he was in the original.
Yeah, and the whole thing was that if Ernie Hudson is funding this other containment unit, and they're doing and they have all this new equipment and it's all updated and it's all high tech, then why is he letting the Ghostbusters drive about on a breaking down Act 1 and a building that's crumbling?
Yeah, the firehouse has no purpose anymore other than for us to see the firehouse, because he's right. Everything else, they have this whole new thing, this whole new building where everything's being funded, all new tech, everything, and they can basically do whatever the hell they want. Basically capture any ghost, but no, we have to worry about how full this containment unit is. That shouldn't even be a plot point, but yet that's kind of what the whole movie revolves around.
Yeah, and the whole thing as well is that, like what I think I'd said to you before, John, is that the thing is that I think I said it in the other podcast, the Ghostbusters one, is that ghosts are such a regular occurrence in New York now that it doesn't faze anybody. Nope. Which is a bit weird to me. It's not scary anymore. The first one was a bit scary for younger kids. Second one had its moments, a bit more comic booky. The second one, not as gritty, not as grounded, but yeah, you know, still a good movie in my opinion. And this one here, I felt as towards the end, it became like Avengers, the Avengers Assemble. It became very Harry Potter.
Oh my god, especially since they lined them all up in a row with all their proton packs, like everyone, the old Ghostbusters and the new Ghostbusters, that's 100% an Avengers Assemble moment. I thought the same thing in the theater.
Yeah.
But it did have one joke when they were actually, that I just forgot about, I just remembered, was when they were actually in that new place that they have all set up, and they're going through and they have the Walkman, and he's like, don't touch that. It's been possessed by some kind of Spin Doctor CD. It's got a cursed Spin Doctor CD in there. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it was I guess it was good for a certain group of people, but for us, I guess we kind of lined up about the same way.
Yeah, I think so, John. You know, it's not one that I want to revisit again. You know.
Nope, I still haven't. I didn't even rewatch Afterlife for that, so I just went and watched that, and I don't think I'll probably rewatch it anytime soon again. It was just like one of those movies, like, 6 to 7 out of 10. It is what it is. It exists, and that's it. It's one and done.
Yeah. Though I can watch Alien 3. I can give Terminator 3 a watch now and again, but I just can't see me watching anything beyond Ghostbusters 2 in future. Yeah. So I seen you done the podcast last night for Terminator 3. I'm sorry I didn't get the tune into that.
It was late. I get that.
It's late. I had too much to drink as well. So
Well, you had a good night, so it doesn't matter.
Exactly. So I can catch up and sleep another time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, once we finish up here, you can go to bed.
Yeah. That's exactly where I'll be going.
So, speaking of which, is there any closing thoughts on The Fog? Now that I got your thoughts on Ghostbusters.
Yeah, I'm glad we got that off our chests. The crucial thoughts is that I think that this is a gem for Carpenter. I honestly believe it is. I think it's a really well crafted movie, and I think there's more to it than just a ghost story. It's the visuals that makes it for me, the atmosphere. And I really do think that people should go back and revisit this one if they're just familiar with more of like Halloween or The Thing or Escape from New York, even, or Big Trouble in Little China. I would say revisit The Fog. It may change your opinion on it.
That's a good point, and I echo a lot of what David is saying. He's a little bit higher on the film than me, but still, the atmosphere, the score, the filmmaking, it's all great. Yeah, and if you've only seen really Halloween or The Thing, you're missing out on a lot of great John Carpenter movies. Really, from Halloween on, you can even include Assault on Precinct 13. The guy couldn't miss. You know, he was just a great 80s director, and it's the first film he made in the 1980s, and it's a very well-crafted movie, a very well-crafted ghost story, and for a genre of film that we really don't get any more of. I mean, we get not this kind of ghost story anymore. We just talked about Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. You get more likely to get something like that than this kind of movie that's very atmospheric in 2024, so it's a good one.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying there, John, and say They Live as well is up there for me with Carpenter films too.
Oh, I love They Live. I mean, it's got Rowdy Piper in the lead role, and he's never acted any better than he does in that movie.
Yeah, that film. When I first seen that movie, that film so surprised me how much I really enjoyed that film.
It's such an original movie. That's why it's like there's nothing else, especially at that time, that's like it. And it just, again, it combines such like cheap effects, and then you also in the middle of it you have a 10-minute fight scene. It's just like
yes,
while also having a very deep message that still rings true today. You know, like honestly, he's just trying to tell us that you're being manipulated. And you know what? That movie came out in the late 80s, and still very true today, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing. We should be scared.
Yeah, I think it's a bad thing, but you'd like to think that times change, but in a lot of ways they don't.
Yeah,
was it Rocky Balboa says only the clothes that change?
Exactly. You know, we like to think that we're going to be the generation that changes it, and then you look back and watch a movie from 100 years ago and you're like, my God, we're doing the same exact stuff.
Yeah. Exactly.
We just don't learn. That's a human problem.
Yeah.
But anyway, guys, that's going to do it here for us on another episode of the Let's Talk podcast with David and I. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on, share this video, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.